Despite intense diplomatic efforts, the US-mediated attempts to broker peace between Israel and Hezbollah are facing significant hurdles, largely due to perceived biases in the mediation process. Historical alliances, political interest and military support for Israel have led to questions about the impartiality of the US as a neutral mediator. These biases have undermined trust and confidence, making it difficult to achieve a fair and lasting ceasefire. As a result, the negotiation process remains fraught with skepticism and unresolved tensions. Why has the US, despite its influence, struggled to navigate these complexities and deliver a successful truce? I am Bahman Nurai. This is Spotlight.
Beirut residents awoke to heavy blasts on Saturday as Israeli airstrikes struck the city, resulting in the destruction of an 8-story building and a significant number of fatalities and injuries. The Israeli attacks have intensified in recent days, now targeting even cities in eastern Lebanon. The regime has also escalated its ground operation in southern Lebanon. This comes just days after a U.S. envoy's visit to the region to broker a ceasefire deal. Amos Hochstein first traveled to Lebanon, where he claimed that a ceasefire was within the grasp. He then traveled to the occupied territories. The trip ended without any official statement and with no apparent breakthrough, dimming hopes for a ceasefire deal.
We had been hoping that there would be a ceasefire, but now I think it will be a long story. It seems that Netanyahu does not want to stop.
The Israelis are playing with us. The Israelis used to do this at the beginning in Gaza. Every day they come and say they want negotiations. They go to Netanyahu, then they come back and reject the negotiations we have been working on.
Amos Hochstein traveled to Israel a few months ago as well, before the breakout of an all-out war in Lebanon. Back then, Washington claimed that his visit is aimed at promoting de-escalation, but just a day after the U.S. envoy's arrival, booby-trapped communication devices were detonated across Lebanon, killing and injuring thousands of people. Just a few days after that, the Israeli regime began its full-scale invasion. Now it seems that every time the U.S. envoy visits the region for the so-called ceasefire and peace, the opposite happens. Many experts say that's because of Washington's unconditional support for Israel, which has emboldened the country to do whatever it wants and push the region to the edge of abyss. Washington's support is both political and diplomatic, vetoing any anti-Israeli resolution at the Security Council and continuing to send billions of dollars worth of weapons to the regime. Beyond their uncompromising support for Israel's war on Gaza, Biden and his aides have been in near complete alignment with Netanyahu's approach to Lebanon. The U.S., over the past year, has voiced its support for Israel's assassination campaigns. Further, Israeli attacks received a similar reaction from Washington. The Biden administration was also mum when the wireless communication devices blew up across Lebanon, killing dozens and injuring thousands, including children, women, and medics. Formally, the U.S. government continues to say that it does not want escalation and that it is working to prevent a wider conflict. But in practice, it seems that this is not the case.
Welcome back. Allow me to introduce my guest. Leila Hatoum, Editor-in-Chief from MENA Uncensored, and Khaled Barakat, spokesperson from Masar Badil movement, both from Beirut. Welcome to the show. Very good to have you on the program and thank you for your time. I'm going to start with Leila. Why do you think, Leila, a US-mediated truce seemed to be failing again?
Well, it's very obvious. We have an outgoing US administration, that's the Democrats. And nobody wants to award such a deal to an outgoing administration that it can use politically against the incoming US administration, the new one, the Trump administration. We know that Trump is going to take over in January. So basically any deal that is brokered now will be held against the Republicans. Not a single political entity on the ground would actually want to stand against the incoming US administration. That's the first reason. The second reason is that this deal that was supposedly brokered between the Americans and the Israelis, and they're trying to enforce it on the Lebanese, it demands that the Lebanese separate the Lebanese front from the Palestinian front. And this is something that the resistance will not agree to. Also, they want Lebanon to accept a buffer zone that the Israelis would create along the blue line. We're talking about 4 to 5 kilometers south of the blue line, and that means basically north of the blue line, and that means basically that the Israelis will be in control, and they will have the Lebanese army as guards to Israel. And this is something that neither the Lebanese, all of them, including the Lebanese army, nor the resistance itself will accept. So the whole deal was created to gain time from now until January 2025, to waste time and just to tell the constituency of the Democrats in the United States that we tried our best, but it was the resistance that refused it. It was a deal that was born to be refused.
Right. Khaled, how might the US's historical alliances and interest in the Middle East affect this truce, peace and procedure?
Yeah, I think that this is a very central question, because in order to understand the United States role, we should not look at it as if they are brokers or they are mediators. The United States today is seen by the people of the region as a colonizer power, as an aggressor. The United States is orchestrating these war crimes against the Palestinian people and against the Lebanese people, just like they did in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places in our region. The U.S. main goal is to protect Israel and to make sure that Israel come out not defeated, because Israel defeats means a United States defeat. It means Germany defeats, Canada, France, Britain, all of those who have supported the Israeli war crimes and Israeli aggression against the people of the region. At the same time, they don't want to implement 1701. They want Resolution 1701 plus. And these conditions that Netanyahu is trying to impose on Lebanon and on the resistance, it doesn't carry any weights as long as, as far as the Lebanese are concerned, for two reasons. One is that there is a united Lebanese and consensus front on a political level, but the most important thing is the battlefield outcome. And we see the steadfastness of the Lebanese resistance, of a heroic and brave resistance that have inflicted so much damage on the Israeli military army and their, against their aggression on Lebanon. The Zionist regime are in crisis, and they don't have the upper hand to force any kind of conditions on Lebanon. Yes, they are committing war crimes. They are targeting buildings and civilians and the health sector, just like they did in Gaza, and they're trying to implement the same thing here in Lebanon, including attacking the capital, Beirut. But this is just, it reflects the Israeli crisis, that they don't have the ability to achieve their goals. And we always have to remind ourselves of this entire thing, how Israel waged a comprehensive war against Lebanon to achieve what? To return their settlers into the north. That's not going to happen unless there is a ceasefire. And the resistance is very clear in its position. First, this aggression needs to stop. And second, the Israeli army must withdraw. And the resistance red lines, as everyone knows, is that it wants the displaced people who left their villages and towns in South Lebanon and elsewhere to go back to their homes. And why should they wait 60 days? If Israel cannot return their settlers into the north for many reasons, because some of them and many of them have actually left Palestine, but the Lebanese displaced and refugees wants to go back immediately to their homes. That will mean a defeat for Israel. They don't want to see that image that happened in 2006, where immediately after ceasefire, the displaced Lebanese people in the south went the same day. In fact, they were there before the ceasefire went into effect, waiting to go back to their villages. Some of them planted tents on their destroyed homes and say that we are not leaving, we're coming back to our homes. This is really a war that needs to be understood as a US-Israeli Western aggression against Palestine, Lebanon, and the region.
Yeah, you mentioned the 60 days, and that's kind of confirmed what Leila was saying about like the time, because that is almost the time from now until the new US president comes into office. So yeah, that of course confirms the hypothesis. Leila, tell me something. You know, these Hochstein negotiations, you know, there were a lot of publicity. What was so specifically different this time? Was it just much ado about nothing, or was it something tangible in it?
There was definitely nothing tangible in it. It was all what we call a marketing attempt. The outgoing Democrat administration is trying to show its constituency that they are working on it. Remember, before Hochstein actually made it to Lebanon, they had their media and their mouthpieces come up with these stories that the atmosphere is positive, that there has been the deal that was put on the table was well received from the other side, that the Americans and the Israelis had agreed to it, and the Lebanese are into it as well. The Lebanese are very smart. I mean, they looked into it, they put their remarks, and they know that the remarks will not be accepted by the Israeli side. That includes, as your dear and esteemed guest said, that he's going, basically that the Israelis should withdraw from all of Lebanese territories, that they should commit to 1701 as is, not 1701 plus. And Hochstein knows that, Biden knows that, and all of the US administration knows that, and the Israelis know that. The whole thing, as we call it, is just a theatrical. They're trying to sell something that nobody wants to buy, and they just throw it in the media to create the hype. Remember, every single time that Hochstein came to Beirut to sell this, basically the Lebanese, this new deal, every single time they alter it, we have an assassination. Every single time he asks for a week or 2 weeks to come up with a decision. What happened is that he came to Lebanon, then he went to Tel Aviv, and after that he flew back to Washington, and he actually said, give us a week or a week and a half so we can come up with the final solution. What happened during that time? The Israelis bombarded the beating heart of the Lebanese capital. They bombarded at dawn today a very well populated residential area in Basta, and they killed over 13 people. They got martyred, and over 23 people were injured, including critical injuries. So every single time he comes over, there's an assassination. It started with Haj Mahsen, and then it basically continued with the pagers attack and assassination of Hezbollah Secretary General, the late Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. And now we have the attack on Basta area, which is an Israeli response that we will not accept this deal either.
Right, Leila. Now, Khaled, you mentioned also Hezbollah in this. You know, while Sheikh Naim Qasim's reaction to the whole peace deal was very cautious, and as he said that we are not going to deny negotiations or say that, okay, that would be absolutely fruitless, but at the same time, we will stay in the combat field and the battlefield, and we will continue. These are not replacing one another. Those are two different paths, parallel paths. So, what's your take on his position and Hezbollah's positions in this? And his stressing on the fact that Hezbollah is part of the political process in Beirut, and there will be no peace without actually considering Hezbollah as part of the deal.
Yes, this is a very important question, because the actual main player in the battlefield is the Lebanese resistance. And with all due respect to the negotiation team and the government and the Speaker of the Parliament, they are trusted by the resistance, and they are carrying the negotiations tasks. But the most important issue for the resistance is the battlefield, because that's what makes the entire difference and the equation in the negotiations. If the negotiating teams, the Lebanese part, wants to have real teeth and a real power, then they have to count on the resistance and the battlefield. That is the only thing that could force, the U.S. and Israel to accept what's logical, the implementation of 1701. In fact, the resistance have did not even comment on 1701. They left that to the negotiating team because what is important for Hezbollah is what happens on the ground, the battlefield. And as Layla have mentioned, a very important role is the resistance also understand that this negotiations comes with also an Israeli aggression and escalation every time this is Zionist, Amos Hickstein, come to Lebanon. This is a Zionist who works for the Mossad and was in the Israeli army. He is not a U.S. envoy, really. I mean, he is Israel envoy. And that's why this is how, we should look at him, not a broker or a mediator, but an actual Zionist who is trying to work for the benefit of the Israelis. Now, when Sheikh Naim Qasim, stated the opinion of the resistance and the position of the resistance, he said that whether this negotiations is successful or not, for us, the most important thing is to continue our effort to end the aggression and to make sure that there will be not one single Israeli soldier on our soil, and that is an absolutely Lebanese right. Everyone knows that this, Israel have occupied South Lebanon for many years, and they were defeated, and the South was liberated with basic, machine guns and, basic weapons. So the Lebanese resistance is not willing to take one day after ceasefire any Israeli presence in the South.
Indeed. Now, Layla, we all know that Israel is practically having a free hand, supported militarily, politically, diplomatically by the US in all of these aggressions in the region. What makes the US think that it can be actually the good mediator here? Because there are a lot of players in the region, and we had like the 14-1 voting at the UN Security Council in the UN recently. It's very obvious that the US is very biased in this. So what makes them think that they will be the right mediator eventually?
We have to be realistic about this one. The Americans, they don't think of themselves as mediators. They just want to order and impose something, and they expect the other side to accept it. This is the art of the deal for them. They give you the deal and you have to say yes. You cannot even negotiate it. And the biggest example, as your esteemed guest, Mr. Khalid, said, Hochstein, the one that the Americans picked to be their envoy to the Middle East, to broker such a deal, is an Israeli citizen, in fact. And he not only served as an officer in the armored, vehicles battalion back between 1992 and 1995, he also, towards the end of his military service, worked as as an officer in the intelligence unit. And then he was sent to Lebanon in 1995. That means he actually took an active role in attacking Lebanon in 1993, Israeli aggression on Lebanon. So when they pick such a person to give you a deal that was actually formulated to be rejected, the Americans don't expect you to basically negotiate with them. They will listen to you, and then they will try to impose on you what they think is best for you and for the world. The other thing is that the Americans look at the Israelis as their extension. So Israel is the extension of the US in the Middle East. When they actually put such a deal on the table, they're not thinking that they are basically negotiating over something that safeguards the Israelis. They're imposing something that maintains Israel's safety in the region. And this is how the Americans think about it. They look at it from a different perspective. We look at it as, oh, it's a deal and we have to negotiate. For the Americans, there's no room for negotiations. It's just like cowboys. Shoot first, ask questions later. You accept it or you accept it. There's no other solution. That's why they continue to support the Israelis to attack Lebanon and create pressure on the Lebanese by attacking civilian infrastructure, killing more civilians in Lebanon, attacking paramedics, hospitals, you name it. These are all war crimes under international law, and the Americans are not lifting a finger to stop it. If you actually want to create the right atmosphere for negotiations to reach an actual deal, you would have stopped Israel from doing so a long time ago, but the Americans didn't, which actually shows that they are biased and they're not here to broker a deal, they're here to impose an order.
Indeed. Now, Khaled, how can international community play a role in this if we want to be realistic regarding a peace deal? Because apparently the US deal is not working. What can the international community do here in the middle?
Well, if the central question is implementation of a Security Council, civil nation and other parties have to be involved in order to do that. But the U.S. is taking this, the what they call the Lebanese file exclusively. In fact, Israel refused any involvement by France. And the reason for that is they want the U.S. solely to be in charge of this situation. And one of the Israeli conditions is to have a U.S. monitoring committee, basically inviting some kind of a U.S. occupation into Lebanon in order to monitor the implementation of 1701. Why the United States is placing itself as a police and a judge and a lawyer at the same time. It's because, as Layla mentioned, the United States is trying to impose its own conditions. Is to say, look, this is the deal, take it or leave it. And I think that the United States is failing, and also the so-called international community is also failing, because often when we say international community, what comes to people's mind is Europeans and Americans. People don't think of international community, in India or Tunisia, like Malaysia or China or Russia. They only think of Europeans and the US. And the world is bigger than the US and Europe. In fact, it's really important that today, Lebanon, to say that we are confronting war criminals like Netanyahu and Gallant, looked at as war criminals by the entire world. I mean, that's what Palestinians and Lebanese are fighting against. They're fighting against a racist Zionist settler colony that is protected by the United States. And every time the so-called international community try to even present a ceasefire, whether in Gaza or whether in Lebanon, in Gaza, the U.S. Veto power is ready. And in Lebanon, the U.S. intervention is always ready. And so it is important to break this hegemony of the United States and to just final point, and to say to the Arab regimes who are acting like puppets to the U.S. to stop doing that. I mean, today, Egypt and Jordan are complicit in the siege against Palestinian people. The same thing goes on United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. This is very important for our people to realize and for the world to realize that this resistance in Lebanon is not just fighting Netanyahu. They're fighting NATO, they're fighting the US, they're fighting all of these reactionary Arab regimes, and the same goes on Gaza. This battle is against an entire camp of imperialists and Western colonizers, and not just Israel.
Right, thank you, Khaled. We have just about 1 minute, so could you please tell me, Layla, what measures do you think should be taken in order for a long-lasting peace this time to be made and to be implemented?
Three words: dismantle the Israeli occupation. End the Israeli occupation. That's the only way for native countries and native people in this region to live in peace, is to have this colonial, settler, terrorist entity dismantled, and everybody goes back to where they came from. At the end of the day, They don't belong here. They're trying to insert themselves, and they're trying to basically secure themselves by killing everybody around them. This is what happened to the Native Americans in the US, basically, when the Europeans first came over there. The same thing is happening over here. The difference is that now we have social media. Now we have what you call people with phones. They can actually document the ongoing genocide and onslaught, genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank as well, and the onslaught that's happening against my people in Lebanon. And the world basically now is in shock. They can do nothing about it, but at the same time, they cannot even defend the Israelis that they have inserted into our countries.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you on the program and very interesting to get your perspectives. Leila Hatoum, Editor-in-Chief from MENA Uncensored, and Khalid Barakat, spokesperson of Masar Badil Movement. This was another Spotlight.